Are you ready to uncover a chilling tale that will send shivers down your spine? Then stay tuned to Midnight Murmurs, where we bring you the darkest and most mysterious stories that will keep you up at night. In this episode, we'll dive into a bone-chilling story that will make you question your sanity. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling stories. You won't want to miss a single one. Chapter 1: The Red-Eyed Girl. The tranquil community of Greenwood was located in a dense forest that supplied its residents' needs. A girl with red eyes and dragon wings was one inhabitant, though, who the locals weren't sure how to handle. The locals didn't like the fact that she was unique because of it. Arya, the girl, had been a resident of Greenwood for as long as she could remember. A sweet elderly woman who took her in when no one else would have raised her. However, the woman had already passed away, leaving Arya on her own in a community that didn't want her. Arya made an effort to conduct herself invisibly every day. She would tend her modest garden, gather firewood, and go on food hunts. However, it seemed that no matter what she did, the villagers would always come up with an excuse to treat her badly. She would be pelted with rocks, subjected to insults, and chased out of the town square. Arya once heard rustling in the bushes when she was gathering firewood in the wilderness. She stiffened, prepared to run away if one of the locals came to bother her once more. But from the underbrush came a huge dragon. Arya was terrified and intrigued since she had never previously seen a dragon. The dragon talked to her in a voice that rumbled like thunder while observing her with discerning eyes. "Young one, your own species has forsaken you. But don't worry, I am here to help you on your way." At first, Arya was reluctant, but the dragon was kind and understanding. He educated her about the magical, amazing, and perilous world that existed outside of Greenwood. He gave her lessons in self-defense, communicating with other species, and mastering her abilities. Arya started to feel a sense of belonging under the dragon's guidance that she had never felt before. She was no longer the only person on Earth. However, she still harbored a secret desire to be accepted by the villagers. Arya made the decision to return to Greenwood one day to see if the locals' opinions of her had changed. But she realized nothing had changed as soon as she entered the village square. She was mocked by the locals, and some kids even hurled stones at her wings. Arya escaped once more into the woods while crying. But the dragon was there to comfort her. "Do not let their harshness shatter your spirit, young one. You are exceptional, and you have a destiny to fulfill." And with those words, Arya felt a newfound sense of purpose. She will not allow the peasants' hostility to define her. She was determined to find her position in the world and make a difference. The dragon and Arya continued on their trip, leaving Greenwood behind. But Arya couldn't shake the feeling that her destiny was somehow tied to the village that had rejected her. She didn't know how or why, but she knew that she would have to return one day and face the people again. Chapter 2: The Mentor. Arya and the dragon flew high above the huge expanse of the mountains until they discovered a secluded cave deep beneath. Arya had never seen anything like that. It was a large cave, with crystals shining in the faint light and the sound of water dripping from stalactites reverberating in the air. As they landed, a wise old dragon greeted them. The elderly dragon was unlike any monster Arya had ever encountered before. He was elderly and intelligent, and he projected a feeling of peace and strength. Arya could tell that the dragon had seen many things in his long life. The ancient dragon introduced himself as Archon and stated that he was a dragon rider, much like Arya. Archon volunteered to teach Arya everything he knew about becoming a dragon rider. Arya was pleased with the possibility of learning from such a competent tutor. Archon took Arya under his wing and began instructing her in the ways of the dragon riders. At first, the training was challenging, but Arya was determined to succeed. She spent countless hours perfecting her aerial maneuvers and learning how to communicate with her dragon. She also learned how to utilize her skills to build a link with her dragon and how to control him in combat. Archon was patient with Arya, constantly encouraging her to be the best she could be. He educated her about the history of the dragon riders and their role in the world. Arya was enthralled by the story and asked numerous questions. As the weeks went by, Arya became stronger, both physically and psychologically. She felt like she was finally finding her place in the world. Her dragon had become her closest companion and confidant, and she trusted him with her life. One day, when Arya and Archon were relaxing, Arya asked him how he became a dragon rider. Archon told her a narrative about his own journey and how he had to overcome many hurdles to become a renowned dragon rider. Arya was inspired by the narrative, and it gave her hope that she could do anything she set her mind to. As the sun began to set, Archon told Arya it was time for her to continue her journey. He added that he had taught her all he could and that it was up to her to apply what she had learned correctly. Arya thanked Archon for everything he had done for her and pledged to make him proud. Arya and her dragon soared far into the sky, experiencing a fresh sense of purpose and drive. She understood that her trip was far from complete, but she was ready to face whatever hardships lay ahead. Chapter 3: The Forbidden Forest. Arya and her dragon tutor, Archon, entered the forbidden woodland. They were encircled by tall trees that shut out the sunshine, throwing an eerie glow over the forest floor. The air was dense with the aroma of moist dirt and the distant sound of howling wolves. Arya clutched onto her dragon as they made their way through the forest, taking care not to disturb the creatures who called it home. Suddenly, they were confronted by a pack of snarling wolves, their eyes glowing with a fierce red light. Archon bared his teeth and hissed, telling the wolves to remain back. Arya struggled to keep her dread at rest as the wolves surrounded them, but her dragon mentor showed no fear. He kept his stance, and gradually the wolves backed off. As they walked farther into the jungle, Arya glimpsed a flicker of light ahead. They approached with care, and Arya gasped at the scene before her. It was a clearing filled with dazzling flowers of every hue conceivable. The aroma was wonderful, and Arya felt a sense of serenity sweep over her. Suddenly, a figure appeared from behind the flowers. Arya was alarmed, but Archon stayed cool. It was a fairy with beautiful wings and a naughty smile. The fairy introduced herself as Amara and promised to aid Arya on her trip. Arya was reluctant at first, not knowing whether she could trust the fairy, but Archon appeared to understand that Amara meant no harm. Amara guided them farther into the jungle, revealing hidden passageways and shortcuts. She told them stories of her own exploits, and Arya couldn't help but feel envy at her freedom and lack of obligations. As the day drew to a close, Amara bid them farewell and vanished into the forest. Arya and Archon made camp for the night, but Arya couldn't shake the sense that they were being watched. In the middle of the night, Arya was roused by a rustling in the bushes. She geared herself for a battle but was astonished when a little animal stumbled into their campfire. It was injured, and Arya couldn't bear to leave it behind. She responded to its wounds, and they spent the rest of the night caring for it. As they continued their journey the next day, Arya couldn't help but reflect on the events of the night before. She recognized that her path wasn't only about finding her place in the world but also about making a difference in the lives of others, no matter how tiny. Chapter 4: The Fairy. Arya and her dragon are flying through a dark forest when they come upon a mischievous fairy named Lyrian. At first, Arya is suspicious of Lyrian's pranks and mischievous attitude, but the fairy offers to aid her on her trip. Arya is hesitant to agree, but Lyrian promises that she can guide Arya to the hidden community of people with magical skills who could accept her for who she is. Arya and Lyrian continue on their quest, flying over mountains and across valleys. They engage in a serious discourse, with Lyrian divulging information about the realm of fairies and the creatures who inhabit it. As they fly, Arya begins to open up to Lyrian, sharing her doubts and fears about her identity and purpose. Lyrian gives comfort and encouragement, reminding Arya that her wings are a gift and that she has the potential to achieve something amazing. As they reach the hidden settlement, Arya discovers that Lyrian has been guiding her on a roundabout route, and she grows skeptical of the fairy's actual motives. However, Lyrian finally brings them to a beautiful glen, where the village is hidden among the trees. Arya is astonished by the beauty of the country and the kindness of the people, who are friendly and welcoming to her despite her peculiarities. Lyrian goes into the trees, leaving Arya with a fresh feeling of optimism and belonging. As she travels the hamlet, she finds others like herself, with magical talents and distinctive features that set them apart from the rest of the world. Arya is happy to have discovered a place where she can be herself and utilize her skills to make a difference. As the day draws to a close, Arya settles into her new surroundings, feeling a sense of serenity that she has never felt before. She understands that her trip is far from finished, but she also knows that she has found a home, and that is all that matters. Chapter 5: The Hunters. Arya and her dragon were soaring far above the treetops when she saw a group of hunters on horseback below. They were carrying firearms and stared up in her direction with mistrust. She had heard stories about hunters who would do everything to rid the country of dragons and other magical creatures, but she had never seen them for herself until today. Arya knew she had to be careful not to expose her identity. She decided to fly lower and blend in with the other birds in the sky. The hunters were still hunting for their prey, and Arya could see their features getting harsher and more determined. They were coming closer to where Arya was hidden, and she knew she had to act soon. She motioned to her dragon to fly away fast and lead the hunters in a new direction. As they sailed away, Arya couldn't help but think about the danger she was in. She knew that she was not safe in the world, but she couldn't just hide forever. She needed to find a place where she could belong and be accepted for who she was. Arya and her dragon flew for hours, trying to evade the hunters, but they were tenacious. Suddenly, they saw a plume of smoke rising from a nearby village. They realized that they had to explore and see whether anyone needed their aid. As they got closer to the village, they saw that it was under attack by bandits. The residents were fleeing in all directions, and the bandits were plundering and destroying everything in sight. Arya realized that they had to act swiftly and aid the locals. She motioned for her dragon to land, and they leapt into action. Arya utilized her talents to build a barrier around the people, shielding them from the bandits' onslaught. Her dragon used his fire breath to scare off the bandits, who quickly fled. The people were thankful for Arya's aid, and they greeted her with open arms. Arya was touched by their warmth and realized that she had discovered a place where she could belong. She felt that she had finally discovered a purpose in life and that she could make a difference in the world. As the villagers celebrated their victory, Arya sat down with them and listened to their stories. She felt like she had finally discovered a place where she could be herself and not have to hide her actual identity. She knew that there would be obstacles ahead, but she was ready to tackle them with the support of her dragon and her new companions. Chapter 6: The Hidden Village. As Arya and her dragon flew over the dense forest, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the trees and signaled for her to follow. Arya was apprehensive at first but decided to trust her intuition and follow the stranger. After a lengthy trek, they arrived at a secluded settlement situated deep within the forest. The community was populated with people who possessed magical skills, much like Arya. Arya was flooded with emotion as she observed the villagers going about their daily duties, free to use their skills without fear of being rejected or outcast. A young woman with long blonde hair and pointy ears approached Arya and introduced herself as Ira, the village head. Ira greeted Arya and her dragon and walked them around the hamlet, introducing them to the other inhabitants and explaining how the community operated. Arya was attracted by the village's unusual culture, which centered on magic and nature. The inhabitants utilized their powers to tend the land, raise food, and treat the sick. Arya was impressed by their abilities to control the elements and summon spirits to help them. Ira recognized the amazement in Arya's eyes and offered to show her how to harness her own magical skills. Arya was anxious to learn and spent the next 2 weeks practicing with Ira and the other villagers. She found that her crimson eyes and dragon wings were not a curse but a blessing, a sign that she was destined for something larger than herself. As Arya studied and learned, she began to open up to the locals, revealing her own experiences of being rejected and an outcast. The people listened with compassion and understanding, and Arya felt a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. Through her interactions with the villagers, Arya began to develop a sense of empathy and compassion for others, especially those who were different or marginalized. She recognized that her destiny was not just about finding her place in the world but also about using her gifts to make a difference in the lives of others. As the days went by, Arya became stronger, both physically and mentally. She no longer felt alone or misunderstood, and she took solace in the knowledge that there were others like her in the world. Arya realized that she had discovered a new home, a place where she could be herself and live up to her entire potential. Chapter 7: The Dragon Council. Arya and her dragon trainer, Archon, had been journeying for weeks, heading towards the capital city where the Dragon Council conducted their sessions. The voyage was long and risky, but Arya was determined to uncover the truth about her wings and find her place in the world. As they approached the city, Arya felt a sense of unease. She had heard stories of the council and their brutal treatment of people who were different. She believed that her dragon would be able to assist her in obtaining their acceptance and finding the truth about her origins. The city was humming with activity, and the streets were packed with people from all over the world. Arya has never seen so many diverse species in one location before. She felt like she had entered a whole new universe. Archon led Arya into the council rooms, where they were welcomed by a number of dragons who looked down on them with disgust. Arya felt a shudder go down her spine as she understood that these dragons were not like Archon. They were cold and calculating, and Arya realized that she was going to have a difficult time convincing them to aid her. Archon brought Arya to the council, stating that she was a dragon rider and that she required their aid to solve the mystery of her wings. The council listened closely, but Arya could tell that they were doubtful of her narrative. One of the council members, a big red dragon with piercing yellow eyes, spoke out. "We have heard of your sort before, daughter. Dragon riders are not welcome in our society. Your wings designate you as an abomination. We cannot help you." Arya felt a sensation of hopelessness flood over her. She had come so far, yet it looked like all her efforts had been for naught. She looked to Archon, looking for a spark of optimism, but he seemed just as powerless as she felt. But then something unexpected happened. Another council member, a smaller dragon with emerald green scales, spoke out. Wait a minute. We cannot just turn our backs on someone who needs our aid. Perhaps we should hear her story before we make any judgments. The other members of the council groaned in agreement, and Arya felt a spark of hope burn inside her. She began to relate her narrative, from the day she was born until the day she met Archon. She spoke of the trials she had endured and the hurdles she had conquered. She spoke of her ambition to find the truth about her wings and her role in the world. As she spoke, Arya could tell that the council members were getting more interested in her narrative. They leaned in, asking questions and seeking clarity. Arya felt like she was finally getting through to them. Finally, the council members conferred amongst themselves, whispering in low tones. Arya held her breath, waiting for their verdict. After what felt like a lifetime, the council members turned to Arya and Archon. "We have chosen to grant you an audience with the Dragon Oracle," the enormous red dragon replied. Arya felt a thrill of exhilaration. She had heard of the Dragon Oracle, a knowledgeable and powerful monster that could see the past, present, and future. She hoped that the Oracle might be able to shed some light on her unusual wings. The council members took Arya and Archon towards the Oracle's lair, deep under the city. The air got colder and heavier, and Arya could feel the weight of millennia of knowledge pushing down on her. Eventually, they arrived at the Oracle's chamber, a large cavern filled with odd lighting crystals and old markings inscribed into the walls. In the center of the chamber, a gigantic dragon sat, its eyes closed in great concentration. Arya approached the Dragon Oracle, feeling a mix of amazement and anxiety. She had never been in the company of such a formidable beast before. The Oracle opened its eyes and studied Arya with a keen glare. "What do you desire, little one?" it inquired in a deep, rumbling voice. Arya took a big breath and said, "I want the truth about my wings. I want to know where they come from and why I have them." The Oracle nodded carefully, as though pondering her request. "Very good," it said. "I will peer into your history and your future and uncover what mysteries are concealed there." With that, the Oracle closed its eyes again and began to concentrate. Arya gazed in astonishment as the crystals encircling the room began to shine brighter and brighter, filling the cavern with a warm, golden light. After what felt like an age, the Oracle opened its eyes again and turned to Arya. "I have seen much," it said. "Your wings are truly a mystery, but they are also a sign of enormous strength. You were intended to be a dragon rider, to restore balance to the planet and battle against the evil that threatens us all." Arya felt a burst of pride and purpose spring up inside her. She had always felt that there was something exceptional about her, and now she understood what it was. The Oracle proceeded. "But be careful, young one. The journey ahead will not be simple. There are individuals who will want to utilize your powers for their own advantage and others who will try to destroy you. You must be strong, and you must be fearless. But know that you are not alone. You have the backing of your dragon and the support of the Dragon Council, should you need it. Arya nodded, feeling a sense of resolve sweep over her. She understood that the road ahead would be rough, but she was ready for the task. As she and Archon left the Oracle's chamber and made their way back to the surface, Arya knew that her life had changed forever. She was no longer merely a girl with wings. She was a dragon rider with a purpose and a destiny to complete. And with Archon at her side, she knew that nothing could stand in her way. Chapter 8: The Truth Revealed. The Dragon Oracle observed Arya for a minute before responding. Your destiny is related to the fate of our world, little dragon rider. Your wings are a reminder of a long-forgotten past, a time when dragons and humans lived in harmony, when the balance of magic was at its pinnacle. Arya was astonished. What do you mean? She questioned. The crimson in your eyes represents your link to the old magic that once flowed freely throughout the globe, the oracle said. Your wings are the mark of the chosen ones, those who will restore balance to the earth and preserve it from darkness. Arya was stunned by the weight of the oracle's words. She had always known that she was unusual, but she never realized that her destiny was related to the fate of the entire planet. She glanced to Archon for support, and he nodded his head in encouragement. What do I need to do? Arya asked, determined to accomplish her destiny. You must go to the old ruins, deep in the mountains, the oracle said. There, you will find the secret to restoring equilibrium to the planet. But be advised, the voyage will be dangerous, and the key will only show itself to the deserving. Arya understood that the voyage would not be simple, but she was determined to accomplish her destiny. She thanked the oracle and left with Archon, eager to go on the next phase of her trip. As they left the city, Arya and Archon discussed their next steps. They decided to go to the next settlement to obtain provisions and information about the road ahead. They were received enthusiastically by the residents, who were thankful for Arya's aid in saving their hamlet from the bandits. The locals related stories of the ancient ruins, warning Arya and Archon of the horrors that lay ahead. Undeterred, Arya and Archon headed off towards the mountains. They met several hurdles along the road, including rough terrain, terrible weather conditions, and frightening wildlife. But they persevered, driven by their determination to fulfill their destiny. As they went higher and higher, the air got thinner, and the temperature fell. Arya and Archon were fatigued, but they pressed on. Eventually, they reached the entrance to the old ruins. The entrance was guarded by a fearsome dragon, who demanded to know their objective. We seek the secret to restoring equilibrium to the planet, Arya said, her voice firm and powerful. The dragon watched them for a time before standing aside and allowing them to enter. Arya and Archon made their way through the ruins, encountering traps and riddles along the way. Eventually, they arrived in a room deep within the ruins. In the center of the chamber, there was a pedestal with a crystal on top. Arya approached the pedestal and stretched out to touch the crystal. As soon as her fingers contacted the surface, the crystal lit up, and a dazzling light filled the space. When the light faded, Arya was holding a golden key. "The secret to restoring equilibrium to the world," Archon muttered. Arya nodded, knowing that their trip was far from over. But she was filled with hope, knowing that she had the power to make a difference in the world. As they made their way back down the mountain, Arya and Archon confronted a group of hunters who had been chasing them. The hunters wanted the key, but Arya refused to give it up. A violent struggle occurred, but Arya and Archon emerged triumphant. As they flew away, Arya realized that she had found her place in the world. She was a dragon rider, destined to restore equilibrium to the planet and make a difference in the lives of others. Arya knew that there would be more trials and barriers ahead, but she was ready to face them with Archon by her side. Over the coming weeks, Arya and Archon traveled the world, using the key to restore balance wherever they went. They endured many more trials and conflicts, but they never lost sight of their goal. Finally, they returned to the city where they had encountered the Dragon Oracle. Arya approached the Oracle and gave them the key. The Oracle inserted the key in a slot in the floor, and the ground began to quake. A dazzling light flooded the room, and Arya felt a surge of energy pour through her. When the light faded, she saw that the world around her had changed. The air was clearer, the land was greener, and the people were happier. "The equilibrium has been restored," the Oracle replied with a smile. "And it is owing to you, little dragon rider. You have achieved your mission and rescued our world." Arya felt a sense of joy and success rush over her. She had fulfilled her destiny and made a difference in the world. She turned to Archon, who nodded his head in acceptance. "Thank you for everything," Arya said to the Oracle. "Thank you for restoring equilibrium," the Oracle said. Arya and Archon departed the city, eager to continue their trip wherever it would lead them. But they knew that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together, with the bond of a dragon and rider that could never be broken. Chapter 9: The Dragon's Vengeance. Arya and her dragon were now living in the hidden village, learning from the other magically endowed individuals who resided there. She felt pleased in her new house, yet a sense of disquiet gnawed at her. She realized that there were others out there who didn't accept her for who she was, and that her struggle to find her place in the world hadn't ended yet. One day, Arya got a telegram from an unlikely source, the Dragon Council. They had heard about her successes and were intrigued by her talents. Arya was hesitant to accept, given the Council's prior dislike for her species, but finally decided to meet with them. As Arya and her dragon flew towards the Council's fortress, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. When they landed, they were greeted by a council member who led them into a dark chamber. Arya's eyes took a while to adapt to the darkness, but when they did, she noticed that they were surrounded by dragons, not council members, but dragons. And they all looked angry. Arya and her dragon retreated away, but it was too late. The dragons surged towards them, their mouths open wide. Arya tried to protect herself, but there were too many of them. She felt the weight of their bodies crushing her and the sharpness of their fangs burrowing into her skin. She closed her eyes, preparing for the worst. But suddenly, she heard a scream, the roar of her own dragon, defending her. The dragons around them withdrew, shocked at the strength of her dragon's attack. Arya and her dragon fled, but not without harm. Arya was shocked, both physically and psychologically. She couldn't understand why the council would do this to her. As Arya recovered, she tried to piece together what had happened. She realized that the council must have considered her a threat, but she didn't know why. She sought the direction of Ira, the ruler of the secret community, and Lyrian, the fairy who had brought her there. They listened to her narrative and attempted to help her make sense of it. Through their conversations, Arya discovered that the council had been corrupted by a group of dragons who believed that only pure-blooded dragons deserved to live. They regarded Arya's wings as a danger to their way of life and had pushed the council to act against her. Arya was shocked. She had always believed that dragons were intended to guard and defend, not to hurt. But now she realized that she couldn't sit quietly. She had to take action. She reached out to Archon, her dragon trainer, and together they formulated a plot to take down the corrupted council members and restore balance to the dragon realm. It wasn't going to be easy. They realized that they were going up against formidable dragons that had the support of the council. But Arya was determined to fight for what was right. She had found her place in the world, and she wasn't going to let anyone take it away from her. They spent weeks preparing for the conflict, recruiting friends from the secret community and beyond. Arya spent countless hours practicing with her dragon, refining their moves and communication. She realized that this struggle would be the final test of their friendship. When the day of the fight finally arrived, Arya and her dragon were ready. They soared towards the council's citadel, preparing to take down the corrupted members and restore justice to the dragon world. The struggle was heated. Fire and ice battled in the sky, and the earth trembled with the might of the dragon's strikes. Arya and her dragon battled valiantly, avoiding bolts of fire and ice and retaliating with their own. They were outnumbered, but their tenacity and abilities kept them going. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they emerged victorious. The corrupted council members were vanquished, and the other dragons had come to understand the mistake of their ways. Arya and her dragon had shown them that their differences made them stronger, not weaker. As they flew back to the hidden village, Arya felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had found her place in the world, not only as a dragon rider but also as a protector of what was right. She understood that there would always be problems and barriers in her way, but she was ready to meet them head-on. And with her dragon at her side, she knew that she could conquer anything. Chapter 10: The Truth Unveiled. Arya stepped before the dragon oracle, her pulse beating with eagerness. She had gone a long way to know the truth about her wings, and now the moment had come for her to find out. The oracle's eyes shone with a terrible light as they peered into Arya, appearing to cut into her whole soul. Arya held her breath, waiting for the oracle's response. "You are not like any other dragon," the oracle replied in a deep voice. "Your wings are not only for show. They are a sign of your fate, and they mark you as a dragon of enormous power." Arya's heart warmed with pride at the oracle's words. She had always known that there was something unusual about her, something that made her different from the other dragons. But to hear it from the oracle, the most powerful being in the land, was a validation that she never thought she would receive. "What is my destiny?" Arya inquired, her voice barely above a whisper. The oracle's eyes shone even brighter as it spoke. "Your destiny is to be a leader, a dragon of tremendous power who will guide the dragons and other creatures of the land into a new period of peace and prosperity. You will experience many hurdles along the way, but you will emerge triumphant, for you are meant for greatness." Arya felt a surge of emotions wash over her. She had always felt like an outsider, like she didn't belong in the world. But now she knew that she had a purpose, a reason for being. She had a destiny to fulfill, and she was determined to make the most of it. As Arya and Archon left the oracle's chamber, Arya couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She had always known that she was different, but now she realized that her peculiarities were what made her special. She had a mission to complete and a purpose to serve, and she was ready to embrace it with all her heart. As they proceeded through the city, Arya and Archon were accosted by a number of dragons. Arya stiffened, expecting them to scoff at her like so many others have before. But to her surprise, they bowed their heads and greeted her with respect. "We have heard of your encounter with the oracle," one of the dragons replied. "We aim to provide our help in whatever manner we can." Arya was completely startled by their politeness. She had never expected to be welcomed by her own people, but here they were, willing to aid her in her quest. Arya felt a sense of appreciation and respect for the dragons who had provided their help. "Thank you," Arya murmured, lowering her head in response. "I am humbled by your offer, and I will try my best to live up to the trust you have put in me." From that day on, Arya and Archon went across the land, gaining allies and battling against those who would wish to damage the animals of the planet. They experienced many hurdles along the way, but Arya was determined to fulfill her destiny and make a difference in the world. As she looked out over the land, Arya felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. She had come a long way since her days in Greenwood, and she had developed in ways she never imagined possible. She had realized the truth about her wings, and she had embraced her destiny with all her heart. She understood that there would be many obstacles ahead, but she was ready to meet them head-on. She was Arya, the red-eyed girl with dragon wings, and she was destined for greatness. Chapter 11: The Council's Decision. Arya's pulse was beating as she anticipated the oracle's response. The council members studied her carefully, their emotions inscrutable. After what felt like an age, the oracle finally spoke. "The council has reached a conclusion," it shouted, its voice booming off the walls of the chamber. "Arya, daughter of Greenwood, you are definitely the kid of a dragon and a human. Your wings are proof of your genealogy, and they are a sign of the immense destiny that awaits you." Arya felt a flood of emotions, a mix of relief and exhilaration. For so long, she had pondered her roots and what her future contained. Suddenly, she had an answer. But what did the council mean by great destiny? "You are not like the other dragon riders," the oracle said. "Your destiny goes beyond Greenwood, beyond even the human realms. You are intended to establish a new path, to unify the many animals of this globe, and to bring about a new period of peace." Arya's eyes widened in amazement. She had never contemplated such a lofty objective. But as she thought about it more, she realized that it resonated with something deep within her. Arya had always sensed a calling, a sense that she was intended to achieve something meaningful with her life. And suddenly, she had a purpose. The council members were watching her attentively, waiting for her reaction. Arya took a deep breath and spoke, her voice calm. "I accept my destiny," she replied. "I will do all in my power to bring about peace and togetherness on this planet." There was a minute of quiet, and then the council exploded into cheers and applause. Arya felt a flush of pride and thankfulness. She had finally discovered her place in the world, and she was ready to accept her position as a leader and a mediator. As the cheers died down, the oracle spoke once more. "But be wary, Arya. Your trip will not be an easy one. There are some who will strive to stop you and prevent you from reaching your goal. You must be strong, you must be brave, and you must never lose sight of your mission." Arya nodded thoughtfully. She knew that the path ahead would be rough, but she was ready to face whatever hurdles came her way. With the council's endorsement, she felt a newfound sense of purpose and drive. As Arya and Archon left the council chamber, Arya's mind was racing with possibilities. She realized that she needed to assemble supporters and seek out others who shared her vision of a better society. But where to begin? Archon appeared to detect her thoughts. "There is a place we may travel where animals of all kinds come together to trade and share information. It is a neutral ground where alliances can be established and information may be obtained. It is called the market." Arya's eyes brightened up. The market seemed like precisely the spot she needed to begin her hunt. She and Archon moved off quickly, anxious to discover what chances awaited them there. As they sailed towards the market, Arya wondered about what was ahead. She understood that her voyage would be long and tough, but she was determined to see it through. She had found her goal, and nothing would stop her from completing it. The market was a huge, chaotic area, populated with animals of all kinds and sizes. Arya and Archon landed in a nearby clearing and made their way towards the heart of the market, where the most fascinating items and information could be obtained. As they traveled, Arya couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. She had never seen so many different species of critters in one area before. There were trolls and goblins, mermaids and centaurs, even creatures she couldn't recognize. But she held her head high and walked on, determined to find allies who shared her vision. It didn't take long for word of her presence to spread. Suddenly, animals were coming up to her, wondering who she was and what she wanted. Arya informed them about her purpose and her ambition to unify the many species of the globe and bring about peace. To her amazement, several of the creatures were receptive to her message. Some had been affected by the wars and conflicts that had plagued the land, and they were eager for a new way forward. Others were just weary of living in fear and isolation, and they viewed Arya's vision as a chance to create a better future for themselves and their families. As the day carried on, Arya met with more and more animals, each one providing a different perspective and a new narrative. She listened closely to their problems and their dreams, and she began to see how she might help them. She started to formulate strategies, to develop connections, and to create a network of supporters who could assist her in achieving her aims. By the time the sun began to drop, Arya was fatigued yet elated. She and Archon had met with dozens of animals, and she had a greater picture of the route ahead. She understood that the journey would be long and arduous, but she also knew that she had the support of many, and that gave her hope. As she and Archon took off from the market, Arya looked back at the chaotic scene below. She realized that there were problems ahead and that there were some who would strive to stop her. But she was ready. She had discovered her mission, and she would do all in her power to make her vision a reality. Chapter 12: The Search for Answers. Arya stood at the brink of the cliff, the wind whipping her hair about her face. She had been looking for information regarding her background and her wings for weeks, but had come up empty-handed. She had visited every library and chatted with every knowledgeable old creature she could find, but no one appeared to have any information regarding her special qualities. She closed her eyes and took a long breath, attempting to settle the fury that had been growing inside her. She knew she couldn't give up, but the continual dead ends were starting to wear her down. "You seem like you could use a hand," a deep voice murmured behind her. Arya turned around, her fingers immediately going for her blade. But as soon as she saw the figure approaching her, she relaxed. It was her old mentor, Archon. "Archon, what are you doing here?" Arya inquired, a smile creeping over her face. "I heard you were in the region, and I thought I'd come check on how you were doing," Archon said. Arya felt a rush of appreciation wash over her. Archon had always been there for her, teaching her everything she knew about being a dragon rider and guiding her on her quest. "I'm delighted you're here," Arya remarked. "I've been seeking explanations concerning my wings, but I can't seem to discover anything." Archon nodded, his eyes shining with comprehension. I know how irritating that can be. But sometimes, the answers we're looking for are right in front of us. Arya frowned. What do you mean? Archon stepped over to her and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Consider all the individuals you've met on your travels. The fairies, the peasants, the enchanted community, they all have distinct powers and qualities, just like you. Maybe one of them knows anything about your wings. Arya's eyes widened as the truth hit her. Archon was correct. She had been so concentrated on discovering knowledge in books and old writings, that she had forgotten about the individuals she had met along the road. Thank you, Archon, Arya responded, having a renewed sense of purpose. I guess I know where to start looking now. Archon smiled. I have trust in you, Arya. You'll get the answers you're seeking. With a last nod, Archon extended his wings and flew off into the sky. Arya watched him depart, feeling grateful for his support and counsel. She took a big breath and stared out over the horizon. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to obtain the answers she was seeking. Arya sailed over the trees, her dragon wings pounding against the wind. She had chosen to start her quest in the mystical town she had visited weeks earlier. She remembered how friendly they had been and how they had welcomed her for who she was. As she approached the glen, she saw the familiar figures of Lyrian, Ira, and several other villagers. They all glanced up as she landed, their eyes full of amazement and interest. Arya. It's very lovely to see you again, Ira murmured, stepping over to her. What brings you back here? Arya took a deep breath, her anxiety starting to get the best of her. I'm seeking information on my wings. I've been searching for weeks, but I haven't found anything. The villagers exchanged looks, and Arya could see the mistrust in their eyes. She couldn't blame them, her wings and eyes were unlike anything they had ever seen before. But then Lyrian pushed forward, a determined expression on his face. We may not know much about your wings, Arya, but we will do everything we can to help you get the answers you seek. Arya felt a sense of appreciation for the locals. She knew she could depend on them to support her on her path. Over the next few days, Arya talked to everyone she could find in the magical community, from the fairies to the mermaids. She recounted her tale and begged if anyone had any information that might help her. At first, it felt like she was back to square one. But then, one day, a wise old magician approached her. He had been listening to her narrative and had something to share with her. Arya, your wings and eyes are not only extraordinary, they are old. They have been referenced in ancient literature and in traditions passed down through the centuries. The patterns on your wings, in particular, are thought to possess enormous power. Arya's heart soared with hope. Do you know where I may get these texts? The magician nodded. I know of a library deep in the forest, hidden from the outer world. It's claimed to hold ancient literature and treasures from long-forgotten ages. That is where you will find the answers you seek. Arya thanked the magician and started off quickly, her heart racing with excitement. She had a lead, and she was not going to let up until she discovered the answers she was seeking. It was a perilous voyage, but finally, after days of trekking, she arrived at the secret library. The library was huge, with shelves upon shelves of old literature and antiquities. Arya felt overwhelmed but also excited. This was where she was going to find the answers she had been searching for. Days passed into weeks as Arya read through the old documents, seeking to comprehend their significance. It was tough work, but she persevered, driven by her desire to uncover the truth. And eventually, after what felt like a lifetime, she discovered what she was looking for. The writings offered a description of her wings and eyes and the marks that graced them. They also disclosed their actual function, to safeguard the dragon riders from danger. Arya felt a feeling of comfort rush over her as she read the words. She had discovered the answers she was seeking, and they were better than she could have ever dreamed. As she left the library, she felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her. She had completed her trek and discovered the answers she was seeking. She understood that she still had a lot to learn and that her trip was far from complete, but she was ready for whatever was ahead. Chapter 13: The Final Showdown. Arya and her dragon, together with the others from the hidden village, arrived at the gates of Greenwood. They were faced with hostility and aggression from the townspeople, who had always rejected Arya. The air was heavy with tension and hostility, but Arya kept her head high, determined to persuade the villagers that she was not the monster they had always imagined her to be. As they entered the village, Arya could feel the eyes of the villagers on her. She went up the main street, her dragon by her side, and the villagers receded, allowing her room. Arya saw the despair and horror in their eyes and decided that it was her job to show them that she was not their foe. The villagers were not the only ones watching Arya's arrival. A mysterious figure watched from the shadows, pondering his next move. The figure was a sorcerer who had long been banned from the hamlet for doing terrible magic. He had always craved Arya's power and resented her for being welcomed by the Dragon Council. As Arya and her group reached the town square, the sorcerer revealed himself. He summoned up a strong spell, pushing the earth to quiver and shooting a shockwave into the air. The villagers dispersed in panic, but Arya stood her ground. She understood that she was the only one who could stop the sorcerer and safeguard the peasants. Arya summoned her dragon, and together they raced towards the sorcerer, who was ready for them. The sorcerer launched a torrent of terrible power at them, but Arya and her dragon dodged and twisted amid the spells. They hurled themselves towards the sorcerer, claws and teeth bared. The magician was clever, but Arya and her dragon were determined. They battled intensely, with Arya employing her magical powers to erect shields and counter the sorcerer's strikes. Her dragon breathed fire, scorching the ground and burning the sorcerer's robes. Eventually, after a long and arduous fight, the sorcerer sank to the ground, beaten. Arya stood over him, her eyes sparkling with wrath. "You have caused enough suffering," she cried, her voice shouting out across the town center. "It is time for you to leave this village and never return." The sorcerer sighed, but he recognized that he had been beaten. He got up, put his head down, and disappeared into the darkness. Arya glanced at the peasants who had crowded around her. She chatted to them, informing them of her travels and the things she had learned. She talked about the value of acceptance and understanding and how they may all work together to make a better future. The peasants listened, and as Arya talked, she watched the dread and wrath in their eyes begin to slide away. She saw a gleam of optimism, and she knew that they were finally beginning to accept her. Arya had found her place in the world. She had surmounted the difficulties that had been placed before her and emerged victorious. She had found a family in her dragon and the villagers, and she knew that she would always be welcome in the hidden village. As the sun set on Greenwood, Arya and her dragon flew off into the distance, leaving behind the village that had once rejected her. She knew that she had made a difference, and that was all that counted. Chapter 14: The Discovery. Arya sat in the council room, still in awe at the bombshell that the Dragon Oracle had just revealed to her. The Dragon Council members had left the chamber to give Arya some space to contemplate what she had just heard. She couldn't believe that her fate was interwoven with a higher purpose, one that might maybe save the planet from annihilation. The Oracle had revealed that Arya's red eyes and dragon wings were not simply random mutations, but rather the product of tremendous magic that was intended to stay dormant until she was ready to fulfill her destiny. According to the Oracle, Arya's actual mission was to lead a troop of dragon riders and magical animals in a struggle against an evil force that threatened to destroy all in its path. As Arya sat there, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. She had always known that she was different, but she never dreamed that her peculiarities could be so substantial. She had spent her entire life seeking her place in the world, and now she realized that her position was on the front lines of a war that might potentially change the course of history. As she sat there, lost in thought, Archon entered the room. He could see the shock and bewilderment in Arya's eyes and understood that she needed someone to talk to. "Arya, are you okay?" he said gently. Arya glanced up at him and shook her head. "I don't know, Archon. Everything is happening so fast. I never anticipated any of this." "I know, but you're not alone," Archon stated reassuringly. "You have a dragon at your side who will always have your back, and you have the backing of the Dragon Council and the magical community." Arya nodded, appreciative of Archon's words of support. "But what if I'm not ready for this?" she questioned. Archon laid a reassuring paw on her shoulder. "You will be ready, Arya. You have gone so far, and you have already demonstrated that you have the guts and strength to confront any obstacle. You only need to trust in yourself and your ability." Arya nodded, taking in Archon's remarks. She realized that he was correct. She had come too far to give up now. She had overcome numerous hurdles along the way, and each one had made her stronger. As the Dragon Council members returned to the room, Arya stood up, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that she had a long road ahead of her, but she was ready to face anything that came her way. "Thank you, everyone," she said, addressing the council. "I realize that I have a lot to learn, but I am eager to take on this task. I will do whatever it takes to fulfill my destiny and safeguard the planet from evil." The council members nodded in accord, amazed by Arya's conviction and commitment. They realized that she was the only one who could lead them in the war that lay ahead. As Arya left the council chamber with Archon by her side, she couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation. She understood that the path ahead would not be easy, but she was ready to confront it head-on. She had learned her actual mission in life, and she was ready to accept it. Arya had come a long way from the rejected and terrified child with crimson eyes and dragon wings. She was now a formidable dragon rider, ready to lead the fight against the forces of evil. The end of the beginning Arya's path had been long and arduous, but she had finally found her place in the world. She had realized her actual destiny and was ready to accept it. Her trip was far from done. Chapter 15: The Battle for Greenwood. Arya sat on her dragon, peering down at the settlement of Greenwood. She had come a long way since she was an ostracized outcast with nowhere to go. She had found a home, a purpose, and friends who loved and appreciated her. But now, her newfound bliss was endangered by the approaching conflict with the humans, who sought to wipe out all magical creatures. Arya had seen the signs, heard the tales, and knew that the war was coming. Arya was not alone in her anxieties. The other magical communities had also heard of the looming confrontation and had assembled in Greenwood to consider their options. The fairies, the elementals, the spirits, and the dragons had banded together to create an alliance to preserve their homes and their people. Arya had been picked to head the army. It was a daunting task, but Arya knew that she had the support of her dragon, her friends, and her people. They had spent weeks preparing for this war, acquiring weapons, training men, and scheming. Arya took a deep breath and addressed the gathering warriors. "We are here today to defend our homes and our family. The humans may outnumber us, but we have something they don't have. We have magic, we have power, and we have each other. We will battle with everything we have, and we will emerge triumphant. We are not just fighting for ourselves but for all magical beings that have been persecuted, enslaved, and slaughtered by humans. We will not let them win. Are you with me?" The troops yelled in unison, their weapons crashing together and their magic crackling in the air. Arya felt a sense of pride and duty sweep over her. She was not only battling for herself anymore, but for all magical beings. The humans approached in waves, equipped with swords, arrows, and firearms. They were resolved to wipe out all supernatural beings from the face of the earth. But the magical army was ready. They fought back with all the might at their disposal, utilizing their magic to shield themselves and strike back at their opponents. Arya and her dragon sailed overhead, showering fire and ruin on the humanity below. They were a force to be reckoned with, a symbol of the might of magic. Arya sensed her dragon's power and resolve, and she knew that they were destined to be together. They battled side by side, their powers entwined, their spirits joined. The fight continued on for hours, with the sounds of swords colliding, magic crackling, and shouts of agony and victory filling the air. Arya and her dragon were in the heart of it, battling with all their might, protecting their allies, and striking down their adversaries. They were a force of nature, unstoppable and unbreakable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the humans began to retreat. They had been defeated, their soldiers had been destroyed. Arya and her dragon scanned the battlefield, noting the aftermath of the combat. They had prevailed, but at a heavy cost. Many magical creatures had lost their lives, and the village of Greenwood was in ruins. Arya felt a tremendous sense of loss and remorse. She had led her people to victory, but at what cost? She had lost friends, comrades, and fellow magical beings. She had seen the genuine face of battle, and it was not nice. But as Arya looked around her, she also saw something else. She saw the survivors, the ones who had battled heroically and emerged from the conflict stronger and more determined. She watched the inhabitants of Greenwood, who had been through so much and had survived. And she saw the future, a world where magical creatures and humans could coexist in peace. Arya understood that the war for Greenwood was just the beginning. There would be more confrontations, more difficulties, and more losses. But she also knew that she and her allies would be ready. They would fight with all their might, preserve what they loved, and never give up hope for a brighter future. Arya went to her dragon, feeling the weight of their shared experiences. She understood that they shared a relationship that was unbreakable, a connection that went beyond words or magic. They were two creatures, joined by their common love of life and their commitment to safeguarding it. As they flew over the ruins of Greenwood, Arya felt a sense of both sorrow and hope. They had won this battle, but the fight was far from done. But she also knew that with her dragon by her side and her allies behind her, they could face anything that came their way. They were the defenders of magic and the protectors of their people, and they would never give up. Chapter 16: The Homecoming. Arya returned to Greenwood, the community that had spurned her. It was a lovely day, and the sun beamed down on the settlement. The verdant trees, rich flora, and meandering river that meandered through the settlement were as she recalled. The village, though, was different. The homes were freshly painted, the streets were spotless, and there was a new sense of life in the air. Arya was anxious when she landed her dragon at the village entrance. Her heart raced as she stepped from her dragon's back and onto the earth. The locals spotted her, and their eyes widened in amazement. "Arya," a voice shouted out. It was an old woman she remembered from her youth. "Is that you?" Arya nodded, and the woman's expression softened. "You've grown up so much," she remarked. Arya's dragon landed alongside her, and the peasants pulled back in horror. "Don't be frightened," Arya said. "He's with me." The locals glanced at her with bewilderment. They had never seen a dragon up close before. Arya could see the terror in their eyes, but she also saw intrigue. "I've come back to help," Arya remarked. "I have a purpose now, and I want to make a difference." The peasants exchanged apprehensive looks, but Arya could sense a shift in the air. The inhabitants of Greenwood were beginning to perceive her differently. "I'm sorry for what occurred before," Arya remarked. "But I've learned so much since then. I've discovered a new home and a new sense of belonging. I want to share what I've learned and help make this community a better place." The villagers were apprehensive at first, but Arya's words began to sink in. She told them about the various magical societies she had met, the people she had assisted, and the things she had learned. She chatted with them for hours, addressing their inquiries and assuaging their anxieties. Days stretched into weeks, and Arya continued to serve the residents of Greenwood. She utilized her abilities to heal the sick, rebuild fences, and bring life to the community. Her dragon would help carry huge goods and move items too heavy for humans. Slowly, but surely, the locals began to trust her. One day, a small girl approached her. "Arya," the girl began, "I'm sorry for how we treated you previously. We were terrified of what we didn't comprehend. But now we see that you're not so different from us. We could use your aid." Arya grinned, feeling a sensation of warmth in her chest. She had finally found her place in the world, and it was right here in Greenwood. She had come full circle. "I'd be pleased to help," Arya responded. "Let's make this village the greatest it can be." The girl smiled, and together they strolled into the village, surrounded by the inhabitants of Greenwood. Arya glanced up at the sky, feeling the sun on her face and the breeze in her hair. She had arrived home. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more spine-tingling tales like it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload from Midnight Murmurs. And if you have any spooky stories of your own, feel free to share them in the comments below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.